Could you be connected with some big event in history? Are you related to someone famous or even infamous? Everyone wants to know their place in history, and now you can. I'm Emmett Miller, and your search starts right now. At one time, the San Francisco Mint was used to house 1/3 of the nation's gold. But today, it houses PBS viewers just like you, searching for answers to the questions they've submitted to us about their very own family histories.
My grandfather's grandfather's grandfather was a black loyalist.
My great-great cousins was smuggled out of the dirty laundry to get her out of Germany.
And in some cases, family mysteries.
It's astonishing.
The reaction has been amazing. To get the job done, we've enlisted the talents of our very own team of genealogical experts.
My name's Kenyatta Berry. I am the president of the Association of Professional Genealogists. Genealogy helps you find a connection to your past and to your ancestors, and you feel like you're a part of history.
My name is Joshua Taylor. I'm the president of the Federation of Genealogical Societies. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, or what you look like. Every family has a mystery. I'm the detective that gets to unlock that story.
We now turn to a woman looking for a connection to a famous historic figure. But it's the truth about her great-grandfather that may shock her.
My name is Lisa Gates. I live in Mill Valley, California, just over the Golden Gate Bridge. My family is 4 generations Californian, and my whole life, my mother has just loved family history, and she used to always talk to me about my own genealogy and our own impact on California history. I have been told by my mother that I am related to James Marshall. That was our piece of history. I had a relative that discovered gold, but no one spoke about it, and he was sort of shunned from the family. My Aunt Rusty's pointed out that we are not 100% we're related. That shocked me, and I haven't been able to find the truth. The other family mystery that we're trying to solve is the one about Clinton Augustus Edson, who's my great-great-grandfather. And he lived in Alameda, and he owned a bathhouse, which back then was like a resort. And we know he was murdered, but there's some conflicting stories about why he was murdered. One story is that he had an affair with the employee's wife, and that's why he got shot. And the other story is that it was a disgruntled worker. But it's always been sort of a mystery that we've been wondering what happened to my great-great-grandfather. I'm hoping to figure out these family mysteries with a real genealogist, not us amateurs.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome to Genealogy Roadshow.
Thank you.
I understand you have some questions about the founder of the California Gold Rush, James Marshall.
Yes, I do.
Well, I have here...
Oh, wow. There he is, guys. That's James Marshall.
James Marshall, discoverer of gold in California. Now, it seems your family has a lot of stories, right, that they, that they tend to pass down.
Right.
Looking at your great-great-grandmother's birth record, we see that Anna's in Maine, right, and born in Maine. Now, we know that James Marshall's family was from New Jersey. So, doing our research, we do see that her family stays in Maine. We could not find any evidence that connected your family to James Marshall.
You're in trouble.
It happens in the best of families, right? And we all here, we're just passing it along, but that's okay. That's okay. Now, you actually had another question.
Yes. My great-great-grandfather, Clinton Augustus Edson. Did he have the affair, or was it a disgruntled worker?
Okay. To possibly dispute the affair situation, Clinton, at the time of his death, is 52, while the man who killed him, Charles Becker, and his wife, are both 70.
Oh, older women?
Maybe, I don't know.
Mrs. Robinson?
Maybe, it could be. But we do know that part of the story that you heard around the disgruntled worker is actually correct.
Oh.
Your great-grandfather, Clinton, did not pay Charles Becker. Charles stated that Clinton owed him $800, which is a lot of money in the late 1870s. Your great-grandfather continually promised to pay his debts, and he didn't. Now, Becker files a lawsuit against Clinton, and he actually lost the lawsuit. So he takes matters into his own hands. He goes to see Clinton, your great-grandfather. And apparently there's an altercation, and Charles Becker is knocked to the ground.
Oh.
Okay, so he comes back a second time. And when he comes back a second time, he brings a gun with him. He finds him walking out of a saloon after he just purchased a cigar. He catches him by surprise, but then is able to fire off one shot, which hits him in his left breast. He starts fleeing.
Oh, wow.
And he fires 3 more shots, all of them hitting your great-grandfather. Clinton then runs into the local candy store, just 2 doors down, and he was pronounced dead.
Wow.
So after he calmly handed over the gun and confessed to the crime. They did have a jury trial, and he is sentenced to San Quentin prison.
San Quentin?
It was manslaughter in 8 years.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Well, I just kind of get a kick out of it how probably my grandfather threw in, oh, well, he had an affair, you know, probably just to spice it up.
That's
that
make
was
it more
sorta,
salacious, yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'm just blown away by all the details. And that he didn't pay the guy for 3 years.
For 3 years.
Are we gonna owe this family $800? They're gonna come hunt us down.
At the end of the show,
Right.
they're gonna be some people outside you need to talk to.
Get your checkbook. So we're done researching it. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you and your family came here today to Genealogy Roadshow.
This is great. Thank you.
I see a line of business acumen here going down, business owners and that sort of thing.
Right.
Is that, and I get laughter, so I know that that's sort of true.
Yeah, I'm a business owner. I have 3 employees. Hopefully
great.
no one's gonna
And
get
they're all
disrupted.
paid.
And they're all paid, exactly.
Stay out of saloons.
That's right. I pay them. I'm gonna pay them early now.
Folks, it was wonderful speaking to you.
Yeah,
thanks
very
for
much.
coming on the
This was a lot
show.
of fun.
In some cultures, oral history is the only means of knowing where one came from. Our next guest is seeking some facts to back up what she's heard.
My name is Cecilia Chen, and I'm a 4th-generation Chinese American from the San Francisco Bay Area. When I was growing up, my dad would tell me some stories about my family history, in particular that we were related to a Chinese American gangster from San Francisco Chinatown named Big Jim Chin. That really sparked a lot of internal dialogue for myself and understanding where I came from in my own family's history. I'm also interested in finding out more about my dad's family history, particularly how my grandmother's family immigrated to the United States. I want to be able to better place myself within the context of Asian American history and understand my family's role being part of the making of America.
Cecilia, when you uncover a story like the question that you asked, it keeps you up at night. This guy is a gangster. As a gangster, you're going to hide from records. You might use aliases. So he did a very, very good job of being a bit mysterious.
So he was a good gangster.
He was a good gangster. That is right. Now, let's leave Big Jim for a while, and let's talk about what's verified and known about your family. Now, there was something that deeply impacted anyone from China attempting to immigrate and really move within the United States. And that was the Chinese Exclusion Act.
When the Chinese first began immigrating to the United States, they were seen as a welcome addition to the workforce, building the infrastructure of the West Coast.
However, by the 1870s, when an economic recession set in and unemployment became an issue, the Chinese were blamed and scapegoated for being unfair economic competition by white workers. And it was the white workers who spearheaded this anti-Chinese movement to pass the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 that would stop them from coming to the United States. Aside from having a detrimental impact on the numbers of Chinese in the United States, the Chinese Exclusion Act created a bachelor society. There were very few women here. In fact, the sex ratio, Chinese men to Chinese women, was as high as 20-1. Men would engage in gambling, go to the brothels, and create lucrative underground activities. And these social vices were facilitated with the organization of tongs, which were secret societies of men who engaged in illegal activities. The Chinese Exclusion Act marked the first time in American history that the United States moved from open immigration to restrictive and exclusive immigration. The population of the Chinese dropped from 100,000 to 60,000 in the next 40 years. And that meant that the Chinese American community was stifled.
While the act was officially repealed in 1943, it wasn't until 1965 that immigration quotas for Chinese citizens were finally eliminated.
The Chinese Exclusion Act was so prejudicial. This is the only time in history that an act, an immigration restriction, specifically targeted a race. And because of this act, your family almost isn't here today. What we know about your family: your grandmother, Mary Fat Yi, her father, her mother, Qin Shi. By 1930, they had made their way from New York to Oakland, California. They actually were on the move quite a bit. New York, across the Canadian border,
Wow.
back to China, Cuba, working.
Wow.
By 1940, the family had made their way to San Francisco. Fat Yi taking his family from New York to California was a risky journey. His movements are watched, and they were forced to carry picture IDs with them. We've been able to dig out a few of those pictures.
Really?
Let's look first at Fat Yi.
I've never seen his picture before. It's incredible.
Another picture we found is going to be of his wife.
Wow.
Here's the other members of the family all grouped together on the passport photo.
Wow. It's incredible that it all exists.
It is. It's the silver lining in this tragic story. Here we have Fat Yi's World War I draft registration card. It's very clearly marked that he is a native-born U.S. citizen. Because of that Chinese Exclusion Act, he was still subject to interrogation. In fact, we do know that your family was actually interrogated. There's over 60 pages of documents relating to the interrogation.
Wow.
Now, let's go back to Big Jim Chin.
Okay.
We know that Qin Shi is from the same area in China where Big Jim Chin is allegedly from, the province of Sunning in Guangdong. In 1931, a San Francisco police officer wrote of a gangster, Big Jim Chin, who was basically involved in gambling, lottery, slave houses. Now we can move on to an article that we found referencing this infamous gangster. Big Jim returns to defy Avengers. According to this article, he uses another name of Chin Chin. A member of an enemy tong was murdered. Big Jim was thought to be the one who perpetrated the murder, and so he fled. Based upon the date that the article says he's returning, we can find someone with that name on that date in the correct port coming back in to the United States.
Wow.
After that, I will be completely honest with you, the trail runs cold. There might be a connection. The lives of Chinese Americans was subject to interrogation at almost every step. And this might have been why we lost the trail of Big Jim. And so this I have to classify as an open genealogy mystery. This one absolutely will keep me up at night because I want to know.
And then you'll tell me.
And then I absolutely will tell you and everyone when we find this. When the documents themselves were almost intentionally hiding the truth, it was the oral history that was passed from one generation to another where the true story lies. And so I don't discount the story that your father told you about the Chinese gangster. I know he existed. I know he's from the same area of China where Fat Yi's wife is from. But the bigger story is your family, despite the government telling them that they weren't needed in this country, fought back. And at every turn did everything they could to persevere. Came in this country, started businesses. They became Americans despite every attempt to stop them from doing that. In my mind, that's the real American dream. Thank you so much for coming today and for letting us share your story.
Thank you so much.
What an amazing story throughout the years of perseverance. What word would you attach then, Cecilia, to your family?
Resilience.
Resilience, and why that word?
It was just incredible to see everything that they had to overcome, and I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for them. Learning as I was older about the history of Asians in America, it's something that definitely resonates very deeply with me.
I think your history makes us all richer. Thank you very much, Cecilia. We're talking to PBS viewers just like you, and they've all come here to find out what may be in their histories, and the results have been amazing.
My mom's mother was a Ziegfeld dancer on Broadway. My great-grandfather came over from Finland. Supposedly, he missed the Titanic.
My grandfather was actually a socialite in San Francisco, invested in real estate before the Great Depression.
If I were to dig into your genealogy, what would I find?
My grandmother is from Russia, and she fled the Bolsheviks when she was a child.
On my mother's side, they came over from France and fought in the French and Indian War.
Some people get excited about sports, they get excited about their favorite bands. For me, it's all about the pedigree and who in the room is related to whom. I love to uncover people long forgotten. They usually don't appear in the history books, but they have fascinating lives and they play important roles. So, Jennifer, what brings you to the Genealogy Roadshow today?
So, my great-grandfather was John W. Lambert, and he invented the first gasoline-powered automobile. And I've heard that he had a feud with Henry Ford.
Okay.
So we've never driven Fords.
Well, we do have answers for you.
Okay, great.
So the first thing we can verify is that he did in fact invent the first gas-powered automobile.
Great.
He actually was years ahead of Henry Ford, and a couple years earlier than others who were working on the exact same thing.
Okay.
So certainly a pioneer. The first auto industry magazine mentioned your relative 5 times with no mention of Henry Ford.
Yes.
So there's definitely a first in your family. Because he designed and built the first car, he also did something else for the first time.
Okay.
That was to crash.
Oh, well, that kind of makes sense, given my driving pattern.
With no other cars on the road, he ran into a tree. Now, when we get to a feud with Mr. Ford,
yes,
we actually can't find any evidence of a feud.
Okay.
Your relative was first, in this sense, and we can't find any direct sort of arguments or anything that happened between the Lambert and the Ford sort of families in that case.
So all this bitterness has been for nothing.
It could be. I mean, your next vehicle could be a Ford.
I could drive a Ford now.
You can. And it's a fascinating family. It's a fascinating story. Thanks for stopping by the Genealogy Roadshow.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
My job is never boring. It's like a movie. You couldn't make this stuff up. I get to look at murder mysteries, bandits, bank robbers, all of those good, juicy things, and I love it. And if you have a family secret, I am definitely gonna find it.
Our next guest is hoping to find out whether her ancestors were involved in one of the most significant wars in U.S. history. She may be surprised at what we found.
I came down to the Mint building today to find out some information about my family. Being from mostly southern states and Texas, just curious if we had any involvement in the Civil War.
Hi, Diva. Welcome to Genealogy Roadshow.
Hi, thank you.
So I know you have a couple questions about your family history, and so I believe your ancestor, Callie Landrum, is the one that you're interested in?
Right.
Well, in doing some research, we actually did find that she was married to a man named William Green Effner.
Yes.
Okay. And now William's father was George Effner, and George led a very interesting life. One of the interesting things is that we could not find a birth record for George or William. But as we dug deeper, we found another record for him. And this is for George. Here we're going to show a muster record of his service So he joined or mustered into the Confederate Army on May 17, 1861. He was in the 3rd Regiment of the Louisiana Infantry, and it was known as the Shreveport Rangers. Now, it was a very elite unit. They engaged in major campaigns during the first 2 years of the Civil War. So all the major campaigns, his unit was a part of that.
Wow.
Almost 2 years from the day that he was mustered in, he was involved in a pivotal campaign that really kind of sealed the fate of the Confederate Army. That campaign was the Siege of Vicksburg. It's under the Union leader, Ulysses S. Grant.
Wow.
Okay. Your ancestor, George, was on the Confederate side.
Right.
He was pushed back to Vicksburg with his unit. We know also that George was wounded in combat. Here we see wounded on June 16th in the trenches. 3 weeks later, the Confederate Army surrendered Vicksburg to the Union Army.
Right.
Now, once this happened, he actually became a prisoner of war.
Wow.
And as part of being a prisoner of war, you had to sign an oath of allegiance. And that oath of allegiance said, I'm not going to take up arms against the North ever again.
Right.
But people who signed the oath went back and started fighting again.
Huh.
And so that actually happened with George, because we do know he shows up again as a prisoner of war in Shreveport, Louisiana. Now, we do know that also George is probably not the ideal soldier. We found a record for him, and in July 1862, he was arrested for disobedience of orders.
Oh.
Okay, which basically meant he didn't follow orders. But you think about it, he's been in every major battle for 2 years, and he just decided maybe he needed a break. And so we can safely say for sure that one of your ancestors was part of the Civil War.
Wow. Considering all that he went through, I mean, he sounds like a pretty serious renegade kind of a guy. So
yeah.
Kind of interesting.
Now, we can also go back a little bit further with your family tree.
No.
Another relative of yours, Joseph Effner, also fought in a pivotal battle, but it was during the Revolutionary War.
Oh, wow.
Now, we were able to locate a pension record for Joseph, and here we can see his military service. What's interesting about this is that he actually fought under Major General Benedict Arnold.
Ooh, juicy.
Yes, very juicy. So your ancestor fought with Benedict Arnold.
Wow.
In both battles of Saratoga, but that doesn't tarnish his service and what he's done and what his unit has done in both of those battles.
Right.
So you have 2 ancestors who fought in both of the major wars that occurred on U.S. soil. You can safely say you can not only trace your line back to the Civil War, to your renegade ancestor George, but you can also trace your line back to Joseph, who participated in 2 major battles under someone who is infamous in American history.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for stopping by Genealogy Roadshow today and letting me share this history with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Diva, Benedict Arnold.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting one.
It was almost sort of a counter-establishment movement in your family down the line in a certain sort of way.
Yeah, I'd say so, and I'm the first one to come out west, so, so I guess it runs in the family.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
How many people can say they're related to someone who's printed on our money? That's exactly what brings our next guest to the Roadshow.
My name is Casey Robbins, and I live in San Francisco, California. I've always wanted to know about my family history and where my ancestors came from. I grew up with my mother and my stepfather, not with my biological father. Not everyone is growing up in a traditional nuclear family these days, so it's getting harder for some people to find out about their family history. On my mother's side, there are Eastern European immigrants that came to the United States in the 1900s, and there were no records to research before they came to the US, so that was a block for me. So I started researching my paternal side of the family, and I started to see some interesting names, like the Folgers. They're one of the founding families from Nantucket, and I know that Benjamin Franklin was a Folger. So I want to find out if through the Billingsley line and through the Folgers, am I actually related to Benjamin Franklin? I think we are. I can't prove it. It would give me more insight to where I came from and who my family is, because I really haven't known for a long time. It's always been a mystery. I can't wait to see what the genealogists find out.
Casey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
All right, you're good. You're here at the Genealogy Roadshow, and you have a very important question.
Yes.
Because you would like to have a connection to this.
Yes, to Benjamin Franklin.
To Benjamin Franklin, not the bill itself.
Not the bill.
How many of you around here, you'd rather have the bill or Benjamin Franklin? Is it a hard decision? So we know this man was a founding father from Philadelphia. We know him at the Constitutional Convention. But let's learn a little bit more about Benjamin Franklin's early life.
Okay.
Benjamin Franklin has long been celebrated as one of the founding fathers of the United States. But most people are unaware of the humble beginnings of his formative years in 18th century Boston.
In many ways, the young Ben Franklin was a typical young man in Boston in the early 1700s. Being the youngest son of 10 sons, Franklin was last in line for choosing a profession. Because of Ben's bookish inclination, as he puts it in his autobiography, his father settled on the printing trade. There were, at the time in Boston, only 2 newspapers. Benjamin Franklin's older brother, James, ran the second of them. It was called the New England Current. And so his father oversaw the signing of an apprenticeship contract between James Franklin and Benjamin Franklin. But being an apprentice meant being bound as a bound laborer to his master. And his brother apparently really took that mastery seriously, and Benjamin Franklin chafed under it.
Eager to find a way out of this apprenticeship, the young Benjamin Franklin saw an opportunity when his older brother published a story that angered the Massachusetts Assembly.
They had a lot of power, so they put James in jail for a month. And when he came out, they passed a law that said that James Franklin shall not publish the New England Current anymore. James decided to have it published under Benjamin Franklin's name. Now, an apprentice cannot publish a newspaper, so they ended Franklin's apprenticeship. But when some disagreement arose between them, Benjamin Franklin decided simply to run away.
He took a boat to New York and from there made his way to Philadelphia, where he went on to become one of the most important figures in American history.
It's quite a guy.
I didn't know any of that. Yeah.
So let's actually go step by step through your tree.
Okay.
And see if we can find a connection to the Folger family and potentially to the Franklin family.
Okay.
So we know that you have an ancestor in the 1910 census in Boise, Idaho. He is Sale Billingsley.
That's right.
You said your family had some connection in Nantucket.
Yeah.
Looking here, this says that Sale was born in Missouri, and his parents were both born in Missouri. Not quite Massachusetts.
Right.
Though if we look at his wife, we see that she's born in Illinois, and it very clearly states that the father is born in Massachusetts. So there's a connection to Massachusetts. Now, this woman actually had the maiden name of Kelton. And we can trace the Kelton family back to the Bunker family. And it's in the Bunker family where we hit the town of Nantucket, Massachusetts. There was a fire in 1846 that devastated the entire community. And your family actually left Nantucket and went to Salem, Massachusetts.
Oh.
Looking at the 1850 census, we see your relative in the town of Salem. If we go to the other page, we actually see various occupations, but among them we'll see that he's a master mariner.
Okay.
So the sea runs very, very deep in your family.
Weird.
Weird?
I'm scared of the water. So.
You're scared of the water?
Yeah.
You know, there might be a reason why. Whaling is not necessarily as glamorous as we might think. Back then, it would have been your relative holding the harpoon, standing on the ship, trying to get the whale. It was a very dangerous profession. In fact, for your family, it proved deadly. In 1806, your 5th great-grandfather, Jesse Bunker, he owned a ship called the Commerce, and during a very, very heavy storm, the ship was lost, and his life was lost.
Sad.
Jesse left a widow by the name of Eunice. And Eunice's maiden name was Folger. Here we have a connection between your family that's from Idaho in 1910 back to a Folger family.
Okay.
In Massachusetts. Yeah. So we actually can trace the line of Eunice Folger back to a man named Peter Folger, celebrated here on this stone.
Yeah.
Now, Peter Folger, we can verify, is your 10th great-grandfather.
Wow.
So we're a few generations back. He actually was one of the first settlers of Nantucket. He's a pretty cool relative for you to have on your tree. When he came into America, he worked to learn the native language. He worked to speak with the Native Americans. He wanted to be a translator.
That's cool.
And he became a court clerk. It was your relative who would make all of the records. So as genealogists, we're really grateful to your relative because he kept all these wonderful records that we find folks in.
That's really cool.
His wife, Mary, actually came over as an indentured servant. Basically, you would come over and someone else would pay your passage, and then you would work off for a certain amount of years that debt.
So how long did they have to?
Usually 5 to 7 years, some were longer, some were shorter.
Right.
In the case of your relative, Peter actually paid $20, bought out her contract, and married her.
That's so sweet.
And he said, this is a direct quote from your relative, that it was the best appropriation of money that he ever made.
Wow. That is really...
So we're back to a Folger family in Nantucket, Massachusetts. Now let's see if there is a connection between your family and Ben Franklin. This is the moment you've been waiting for.
I have, yeah.
We don't often like to cite things that are fictional.
Yeah.
But in this case, we can actually turn to something your family might have liked, the famous novel Moby Dick. In the beginning, Melville writes, the grandmother of Benjamin Franklin was Mary Morrow, afterwards by marriage, Mary Folger, one of the old settlers of Nantucket. So let's look at the connection.
Okay.
So here we have Peter Folger and Mary Morrow.
That's the indentured servant?
It's the indentured servant, yep. And if we come down over here, we see Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, yes.
Over here is your Folger line. So in this case, Nathan Folger, who's your relative, was the first cousin of Benjamin Franklin.
There is a connection.
There is a connection. In fact, we can trace the line, and you are, I'm very happy to say, Benjamin Franklin's first cousin, 10 times removed.
Wow.
A lot of us, want $100 bills, but how many of us can walk around saying, that's my first cousin, 10 times removed, but that's my first cousin?
I will be thinking about that next time I see a $100 bill.
Congratulations.
Thanks, yeah.
Casey, I mean, how much fun is this?
It's amazing, really. I was hoping, but I wasn't 100% sure, so this makes it real. And I didn't know that one of my relatives died at sea. That was fascinating.
That's crazy.
I want to know more about him, too.
It's almost like your history could be a book in itself.
Yeah.
Well, Casey, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
What fun.
Yeah.
There are many practices in genealogy that are surely not an exact science, but one science is as close to exact as it gets, and that's DNA.
So hi, Michael. Welcome to Genealogy Roadshow.
Thank you for having me.
So I know that your DNA was very important to you because you don't know some of your family history, and this is a burning question you had?
I'm a bone marrow donor.
Oh, okay.
And I went to a bone marrow drive and I gave my blood sample, but they contacted me and said I have an uncommon HLA, human leukocyte antigen, that most of the population doesn't have.
Oh, okay.
And if I ever get sick, I'm out of luck.
Oh.
And they want to know more about my ancestry.
Interesting.
And they want to classify us into a database to people that have the uncommon HLAs.
Okay. We looked at your DNA results. We actually did something called an admixture test, which tells you how much European, Sub-Saharan African, Native American, and East Asian you are. Looking at your results, you are primarily of Northern European ancestry, with small amounts of Southern and Eastern European ancestry, and a tiny amount of North African.
Okay, I've been to the Middle East. I like that.
Okay.
They're nice people.
Now, it looks like your father's 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 father, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, ancestral line likely originated in Scandinavia.
That's like ABBA country, right?
It's like ABBA country. That's what she gets. So thank you so much for coming to Genealogy Roadshow today. It's been great meeting you, and
Wonderful meeting you too.
I'm so happy I was able to provide you with your DNA results.
While the genealogists continue their work, let's take a moment to admire our surroundings. Today, we're at one of the most indestructible and wealthiest buildings in America, the San Francisco Mint. The San Francisco Mint originally opened due to the frenzied search and discovery of gold in California from the mid to late 1800s. The gold mines overwhelmed its original site, so a bigger and better equipped mint was built in the heart of the Mission District at 5th and Mission Streets in San Francisco. Within its first year of operation, the San Francisco Mint turned $4 million worth of gold into coins. Under the eyes of the watchful guards, San Franciscans would line up outside the mint and drop off their gold and silver to be made into coins. The success and prosperity of the city and its residents were suddenly and shockingly halted by the 1906 earthquake. Buildings toppled, streets crumbled, and fires raged throughout the city. When the smoke cleared, the Old Mint was one of the few buildings in San Francisco left standing. The Old Mint's survival can be attributed to its architect, Alfred B. Mullett. Mullett had the foresight to design the Old Mint to float during an earthquake. During construction, the weight of the soil removed to build the foundation equaled the weight of the building itself. The design made the Old Mint hold steady during the earthquake rather than shatter like the majority of other buildings of San Francisco. As the only functional institution after the 1906 disaster, it was used as a relief fund treasury that helped the city rebuild itself. Much of San Francisco and the nation's history lives inside the walls of the Old Mint. By 1934, it produced more than half of the United States coinage and held a third of the nation's gold supply. The Old Mint operated until 1937. From beginning to end, it was one of the most active mints in the United States. It exists today as a historical landmark and a testament to San Francisco's resilience in the face of natural disaster. For some, finding out information about your past can be revealing. For one woman, it's the piece of the puzzle she's been waiting to discover.
Carla, welcome to the Genealogy Roadshow.
Thank you so much.
It is great to have you here. So walk me through what we have here.
My family tree, as much as I could do. What I found is that I could only get to one of my grandmothers, and I couldn't get above my grandfather at all, so it's just a question mark.
All right, let's get some answers. So what we know that your grandfather is born in 1888 in Ashland, Kansas. We know that at the age of 21, he was working as a meat cutter in a butcher shop. We think we had no meat cutters in the family?
We had no meat cutter.
We do now. We do now. When we go back a generation, we know that his father's name was Delaney Rogers, and Delaney's born in a log house in Indiana. From there, we know that he went to Kansas, where in 1884, he homesteaded for several years. So he would have filed for an official homestead application and obtained land from the government. He also was described, and this is in quotes, as a very active Republican. If you go back another generation, we hit Gamil Delaney Rogers, who's born in Indiana, and he actually serves in the Civil War. He's on the Union side. He serves from 1861 to 1864, where he's mustered out in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So you do have an ancestor who fought in the Civil War.
Thank you so much for doing all this for us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Our next story is about one man's love for a woman that moved the earth, literally.
My name is Jamie O'Keefe, and I'm a 5th generation San Francisco native. When a person passes away, it's like a library burns down, and I think that's really important to remember. My dad loves family stories. He loves to embellish family stories, and he told me the story of his grandparents meeting as a result of the 1906 earthquake. He's very proud of this story because it's a big deal to have relatives who lived through the earthquake. The first version of the story I heard from my dad was that My great-grandmother, Ann Savage, lived on Rincon Hill, and Frank O'Keefe, my great-grandfather, lived elsewhere. And when his home burned down because of the earthquake, he stayed at Ann's barn, and that's where they met, and they married a year later. I talked to my dad about that story later on. He said, no, that wasn't it. After the earthquake, when her home burnt down, she went and stayed at his bar. There's no barn, it was always a bar. And so the story changed over the years. I'd like to see if the 1906 earthquake did play a big part in their meeting. And did someone have a barn? Or was it always a bar the whole time? And why would a proper lady be in a bar at that time? So those are a few of the questions I'd like to have answered if possible.
Hi, Jamie. How are you doing?
Oh, good, thanks.
Thank you for coming to Genealogy Roadshow today. Now, before we go into the 1906 earthquake, I wanted to take a step back from when your family first came from Ireland. We know that your relative, Timothy O'Keefe, left Ireland in 1874, and he made his way to the States. We know that Timothy came into America with a woman whose name we have not been able to uncover, and they had a child, Edward O'Keefe.
Oh, okay.
Now, the Irish population was about 1/3 of the entire population of the city of San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
So that means that Timothy and his family were living in a very deep, connected Irish community. In 1896, Timothy is operating a grocery store and a saloon, and it is known as O'Keefe's Saloon, and your family is thriving. Their businesses are doing well. They've made a name for themselves. Now, just 7 years later, Timothy dies.
Oh, okay.
However, the business is continuing to operate because he has his eldest son, Edward, who takes over the business for him. And we can see here that he's actually listed as a bartender.
Oh, okay.
We know that when Timothy died, he left behind 4 children, and the youngest being your great-grandfather, Frank, who was about 18 at that time.
Oh, okay.
Now, your great-grandmother, Ann Savage, was a daughter of Irish roots. Her and her sister actually owned a company as well.
Oh, okay.
And it was known as the M&O Savage Company. Now, their primary product was ostrich feathers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is kind of unique.
I'd never heard that.
Now, in 1906, there is a life-changing event. I know you're well-versed in the earthquake of 1906, but for the sake of our audience, let's get a quick history on it.
The San Francisco of today has a reputation of being a city of peace and love, but on the morning of April 18th, 1906, the streets were anything but peaceful.
At 12 minutes after 5 that morning, a massive earthquake ripped through 270 miles of the San Andreas Fault. The epicenter of that earthquake was about 2.5 miles straight west of here in the ocean. There was an initial shock from the earthquake, and then a pause, and then a much larger shock that lasted maybe half a minute, a bit more than a minute altogether. Geologists today estimate that that earthquake would have registered between 7.7 and 7.9 on the Richter scale. It toppled ancient redwood trees, it knocked a locomotive on its side, it twisted city streets and streetcar lines, it broke gas pipes and water mains. Fires sprang up almost immediately, fed by the leaking gas pipes. They quickly coalesced into a gigantic firestorm. The fire destroyed the palatial homes of the wealthy and the shanties of the poor. It destroyed churches and brothels and about 1 million books.
As the city's firefighters buckled under the enormous strain, the army was dispatched to help. Together, they battled the flames for 3 days and 3 nights before they finally brought them under control.
3,000 people died in the earthquake and fire. The damage estimates reached $400 million, equivalent to $10 billion in today's purchasing power. More than half the city's residents were left homeless, 225,000 people. At first, many of the survivors found shelter in army tents in the city parks and had to stand in long lines waiting for food at army field kitchens. But among those survivors, there grew up a real camaraderie. Strangers quickly became friends in those circumstances.
This camaraderie boosted the resilience of the people, and the city was soon rebuilt from amongst the ash and rubble.
Wow. Now, we do know in looking at your family's history that your great-grandfather, Frank O'Keefe, his family survived the earthquake, their saloon, their grocery store. They were living in the Mission District at that time, so most of the homes escaped damage there. We know that Anne and her family weren't so lucky. Even though they were only 3 miles away, the homes are completely devastated in that area. So I'm a romantic. And since they didn't live that far from each other, again, we're looking at a very deep and connected Irish community. And since O'Keefe's was a saloon, a grocery store, and part of the community, and since we know by 1909 that Frank and Annie are married, it is definitely probable that Anne would have sought shelter there. Based on all of the things that we have discussed, it is my belief that your ancestors did meet in the aftermath of the 1906 earthquake. So you can now continue to share this story with your family and know that it was actually at a saloon named O'Keefe's
Yes.
instead of in a barn or wherever else.
Wow, okay.
So your family is really part of a city that rebuilt itself after the 1906 earthquake.
That's always been a point of pride in our family that we did have relatives involved in the 1906 earthquake. Always great to hear a story of something good coming out of something really bad. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming to Genealogy Roadshow.
What a fun story.
Oh, yeah.
The city's burning. Everyone is scared out of their minds. People are ducking into places, and suddenly you have two people that make a connection.
They were brought together under the worst kind of circumstances, but made the best out of it. And I really like that part of the story. Their perseverance brought them through, and they started a family here, and here we are today.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for coming on, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you.
For our last story, a man's come to us wanting details of a very painful past. We hope to give him the confirmation he so desperately seeks.
I want to know more about two of my ancestors, one being Eliza Lindgren, who I believe is my great-great-great-grandmother, and her sister Josephine Beach. Josephine Beach is one of the few survivors at a massacre that occurred in 1860 in Humboldt Bay, so I've been led to believe. And I just want to verify that that's the case. There's a lot of family legend associated with this stuff, and just knowing whether or not these things actually happened would go a long way. My mom died beginning of March of this year, and I want to do this to kind of validate something she had started.
Jim, welcome to the Genealogy Roadshow.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We are so excited to have you here. You brought something.
Yes, I have.
What is this?
This is a walking stick that I spent my entire life believing was Eliza Lindgren's. Literally the day she died, I asked my mom about it, and she told me it would actually belong to Josephine Beach, who I am under the impression is Eliza Lindgren's sister.
Okay, so we have a family heirloom in front of us.
Absolutely.
We're trying to figure out how close it might be connected.
Right.
So Josephine Beach and Eliza Lindgren are both Native American.
Yes.
We know that Eliza Lindgren was the last medicine woman of the Churai.
Right.
Now, the Wiyot Massacre. This is a horrible event. In late February of 1860, the Wiyots were celebrating a sacred ceremony that lasted 7 to 10 days. On one of the nights of those ceremony, the young men would leave and travel to get supplies for the next day. After the men left, a group of whites came to the island. They massacred what is estimated between 80 and 100 women, children, and the elders. Josephine Beach was sailing in a canoe to attend the ceremony. The fog was fairly bad, so she turned around with her son and went home. Her family was not as fortunate. At age 19, Josephine, we believe, lost almost every member of her family in that massacre.
And to have that story verified as actually happening is kind of, it's upsetting.
Now, looking for a connection between Josephine Beach and Eliza, we do have a picture of her. We know they were from two different tribes. It's not uncommon for tribes to intermarry at some point for alliances, though we couldn't find a connection through an intermarriage. In 1900, we find Eliza on the Indian census.
Okay.
She's at the very top. She's head of the household. Her daughter, Dora, is there. So here's Eliza in 1900. Let's go find Josephine in 1900. Now you notice she's not on the Indian census. This is the general population schedule.
Oh, wow.
And what's very interesting is this column right here is the race column. Now, everyone else on the page, and even in her household, all have the W for white.
Okay.
If you look very carefully, and this is where the detective part of the job comes out, this is where the magnifying glass comes out, it looks like there is either an IN or an ID or something written underneath and a W written on top. Like someone altered the original enumeration, worrying that it might look funny to have someone who is Native American listed in a family where everyone else was listed as white. Sometimes records can be altered and changed to fit with the times. But we do know this is her in the 1900 census.
Okay.
Moving forward in time, Eliza's daughter, Dora, has married Fred Beach.
Okay.
Dora marries the son of Josephine Beach.
Oh, okay.
Now, let's connect the dots. We see that Eliza and Josephine are not sisters.
They're sister-in-law.
They're sister-in-law in this case. They're in-laws.
Okay.
Their children married one another. From looking at census records, they lived very close to each other their entire lives.
Wow.
At one point, their children married each other.
It's astonishing. So they're chosen sisters.
Yes. Now, when you look at your family tree, there's Frederick C. Beach, and there's Josephine.
Okay.
So that's your ancestor's walking stick.
Whew. Thank you. Wow. The fact that a survivor of the massacre like that actually is an ancestor of mine is profound.
We have these items we keep around our houses.
Yeah.
And we always say, oh, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so. But this is your story.
It was just the fact that, you know, the day my mom dies is when she tells me that this is actually Josephine's and not Eliza's. Yeah, this is an absolute family heirloom. It has no intrinsic value otherwise, but it means a great deal to me. And it just means more now. It's kind of a profound thing. It's haunting. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
My mom would have loved this. My mom would have adored this opportunity, and I just wish that she could have been here to partake in it.
Thank you for stopping by the Genealogy Roadshow today.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Jim, Britta, what a day. What a story.
Just the fact that my existence hinges on a woman getting lost in the fog. If Josephine actually makes it to the island that day, I don't know if I exist. That's something to swing your head around.
What would you say to her, your mom, if she were here now?
I miss her so distinctly that I just want to let my mom know how appreciative I am of being able to trace this back.
And as the sun sets on the city by the bay, so ends another genealogical journey. A journey that paid off in Franklin's, Ben Franklin's. A journey that led from coast to coast and back to China, showing what it was like to be Asian American around the time of the gold rush. And a journey that helped two people find love amid a fire-ravaged San Francisco of 1906. Kind of makes you wonder what we'll bring you next time here on Genealogy Roadshow.